Look down through your window, no big city lights, just greenery. I don't know what you come for. Listen up, my dear, we're such a man free. Welcome to the land of many faces. Not one, not two, but 6 different races. You know when the sun kisses your skin, you're in the right place. Guyana, oh, that's my beautiful country. Guyana, one people, one nation, one destiny. Don't stop for a minute. Come, let me take a walk with Brother Tiki. You'll see our landmarks and our monuments. They're so unique. The high brick structure, the lighthouse, the tallest wooden structure, cathedral, 176th Street, monuments, and the beautiful city hall. You know with the wind in your hair, you're in the right place. Guyana, oh, that's my beautiful country. Guyana, one people, one nation, one destiny. Look down from your window, no big city lights, just greenery. I don't know what you come for. Listen up, my dear, we're such a man free. Welcome to the land of many faces. Not one, not two, but 6 different races. You know when the sun kisses your skin, you're in the right place. Guyana, oh, that's my beautiful country. Guyana, one people, one nation, one destiny.
If I think about the ways you make me smile, I'd be sitting here and smiling for a while. Although I know I make you cry sometimes, your happiness is ever on my mind. I cannot repay for everything you've done, but my love for you burns brighter than the sun. No matter where my feet and mind may go, my heart will lead to you and you alone. Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. A paradise so wondrous to behold, a work of art, your heart is gleaming gold. They sail the waters, soar above the trees, to find the gem between the mountains and seas. Your children all We try though we may fall. We stand united now to heed your call. Our fathers fought the fights for liberty. Forever I'll defend Guyana free. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody stand? Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody take a stand? Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody stand? Rise up for your land. Oh, Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forever. I'll be holding on to you, Guyana, Guyana. May the blessings of God never leave your shore. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore.
Bire mazak wurut nogong, morawia kok manoro tijik ningkai.
We are one Guyana, a place of peace, a place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our world. A place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our world.
Yeah, some are we born on the hills, some on the low coastal plains. plenty rice and sugar cane. Same Guyanese blood in our vein. So make we burn out the hatred, time for erase it. Can't make that destroy. 6 races are share the same space in this 83,000 square miles.
We are one Guyana, a place of peace, a place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our world.
Brother is a brother, no matter which religion is you. Could a Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Hindu. Sister is a sister, real and true. One big water culture brew.
And all of we together could really make this dream come true of a brighter Guyana for me and you. Ocean to mountains, hear this tune. Take it Kulu.
We are one Guyana, a place of peace, a place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our world. Love runs deep like a beautiful rivers for Guyana. Oh, and when we stand as one, mighty like Mount Jerima, for Guyana, for Guyana. Our life would be beautiful, just like Guyana. She's blessed us with her own, just got to embrace her. Say, one and alone can't talk, so let's put our hands together. Give her a standing ovation, this great nation, a little gem of this world, yeah. A place of peace, a place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our world.
We are one Guyana, a place of peace, a place of love. We are one Guyana, it's paradise, it's our
We come cross the Caribbean Sea, mother, father, pick me, and we settle down in GT. Why oh? We been down on the coastal plain, in the hot sun or pouring rain, planting the rice and cane. Why oh? Yes, we take off the boots and we put on the roots. Why oh? So the crab would that grow in the SC Crepo is we own. And the 6 o'clock bee and the Saki Winky is we own. And the lava that run from go by your gun is we own. And them all of our posts down the quarantine coast is we own. Wondering crab is we own. True leaping up is we own. Umanayana is we own. Fried Koraila is we own. Arapaima is we own. Umanayana is we own. Whether Grover, whether Pleasance, we do Pagua and Confidence, and we know how to wine and prance. Why oh? And we celebrate Diwali, and then time for Mashramani. It's party, party, party. Why oh? Yes, we know how to fat till the underwear wet. Why oh? So the crap out that grow in the SC Crepo is we own. And the 6 o'clock bee and the Saki Winky is we own. And the lava that run from go by your gun is we own. And them all of our posts down the quarantine coast is we own. Wondering crab is we own. True leaping up is we we own. Umanayana is we own. Raikaraila is we own. Arapaima is we own. Umanayana is we own. Chip, sugar, cake, and sawfish and bake is we own. Katahar curry and chupalari is we own. Mauby and ice, black eyed peas and rice is we own. Coconut, metachi and wiri is we own. Babula and lichan with the cutter in the hand is we own. And the tiger lily and the blue dashiki is we own. And Frankie Manise with the boom boom cheese is we own. And the lion town in lead funky fong is we own. And the fellas in the tree seeing cricket for free is we own. And the brother in the night preaching Jordanite is we own. And Mary fall upon the seawall is we own. And the girl foot fine but large she behind is we own. So the crap of that bro and the Yessi cripple is we own. And the 6 o'clock bee and the Saki Winky is we own. And the lava that run from go buy your gun is we own. And them Wallaby post on the quarantine coast is we own. Wondering crab is we own. Truly Benab is we own. Umanayana is we own. Fried Karaila is we own. Arapaima is we own. Umanayana is we own.
We come from the country they call Guyana, land of the bauxite, the rice and sugar. We come from the country they call Guyana, land of the bauxite, the rice and sugar. Me say pack up the grip and let me go. Me got we come back to Guyana some more. Me say we pack up the grip and let me go. Me got we go back. Babu, I am the very best of the Guyanese Babu. Oh, Bangali Babu, oh, Guyana Babu, oh, Bangali Babu, oh, Guyana Babu. I am going back to Guyana to find me one good.
Extremely happy with the tone of the district. About 90%, in fact, over 90% of all that we've promised. And this is across the country, but more so in the American. We promised to resume the land titling activity that APNU had practically shut down, although we left them with over 10 million US to continue that activity. We have done so. We promised to rehire the 2,000 CSOs whose salaries were contributing over 700 million to the village economies of indigenous communities. That APNU had terminated. Today, that figure is about 2,700 CSOs, up from just under 2,000 that APNU terminated. And there are another about 2,000 persons who are working on the part-time jobs. So through those two initiatives alone, we have over 4,500. We engage the communities in intense discussions, and we have done so. I'm now going to today explain all that we've done, because that will take a long time to do so. It will take hours and hours. But just to give you an idea of some of the things we have done, the major things. For example, in this year's budget alone, we have close to $6 billion for roads in the hinterland, particularly roads connecting communities, like the Maruka-Quibana Road, the Mabaruma to Wauna Road, and many also internal roads in many of the villages, like in Region 9 and the Maruka sub-district and the Mabaruma area. We probably have about 2 kilometers of concrete road in Mabaruma, which will cost, that's within the settlement itself, over 400 million this year. The same thing in Port Kaituma. We're just wrapped up a program to do roads in Anai, internal roads in Anai, Aishalton, all of these areas, similar to what we have done in Letem. So substantial investment in infrastructure. As you know, 4 of the 12 hospitals that we are planning to start this year will be in the 4 regions, 1, 7, 8, and 9. And that would be about $100 million US, over $20 billion. We also have in this year's budget alone in excess of $5 billion to continue building school-related infrastructure in many of the Amerindian communities. At least 7 new schools would be designed or start the construction. We started some, but about 7 of them will start this year. That would allow a lot of the communities where they have congestion to have the children go to a place that is more comfortable. I'm just speaking about the hinterland communities because you have a parallel process happening on the coast. And normally we speak a lot about what's happening on the coast. The 30,000 solar panels that we ordered as soon as we got into office, but because of COVID being delayed, it started arriving for every household in the hinterland and riverine areas. But this is not just Amerindian households, for everyone who live in these areas. So, these are just some of the issues that we have addressed. Yesterday, when I spoke, it was not yesterday, the day before yesterday, about the low carbon development strategy and the indigenous communities. We've seen a concerted attempt by the APA to block the funds. And I had to point out in my presentation that this is not something new, that in 2009, when we launched the first low carbon development strategy, and we had the agreement with Norway, that APNU, AFC, and the APA tried to block the funds coming to Guyana by writing Norway. You can go back, if you Google it, you will see that, the $250 million we earned. I pointed out the duplicity of that, in that the very people who sought to block the funds ended up being the biggest beneficiaries of it when they came into office in 2015, because they had resources and they took credit for a lot of the activities funded by the LCDS funds. For example, Cathy Hughes had this program for ICT, $17.1 million from the LCDS funds earned by the government of Guyana at that time through the sale of forest carbon to Norway was dedicated to that activity. She took credit for it all across the hubs, but it was funded from that source. Granger took millions of dollars from the LCDS fund to pay consultants to create this green state strategy, which we promised to scrap and which we did as soon as we got into office, because it was useless. And so it's not new. And the same things, the arguments they made in the early period about lack of consultation, etc., with the villages, all of that disappeared when they started using the funds. So we've seen a similar thing with the return to office, the expanded LCDS, the 2 years attempt, and not attempt, but the 2 years effort to get our forests certified by global standards, the Architecture for REDD+ transaction and the trees standard. And having succeeded with that, by getting our entire forest certified and then entering the market, having our forest carbon not only certified for bilateral purchases, but now being able to be traded in a compliance market, the CORSIA market, not a UNFCCC compliance market, because there's none of that for forest carbon, but the CORSIA market. Our carbon credit is eligible to be traded there, which is a major achievement for Guyana. No other country has had their forests being able certified to that level. And and having concluded a bilateral deal which defied market expectations, where voluntary carbon is being traded at $4 per ton. But we had a floor price of $15 for forest carbon credits generated between 2015 and 2020. We went backwards in the period that we lost under APNU to what we call the vintage credits. And we sold some of those too. And then $20 for between 2020 and 2025, and $25 between 2025 and 2030 for our carbon credits. But also building into the agreement that if this is traded further on secondary markets, that is our forest carbon, that we'll get 60% of the price change, that is upside, the price upside. So if it's traded at, say, we sold it for $20 and it's sold at, say, $120, we will now get $60 more. We'll get $85 of the 120, because we would have benefited from 60% of the upside, and that's built into the agreement that should it be traded further. So it's a unique thing, and it's a great deal. And then we made a policy decision at the government level that although indigenous people's land are less than 15%, and indigenous people as part of Guyana benefit from the spending of resources across the board, as I just mentioned, roads and hospitals and schools, that those communities will get directly 15% of the proceeds. We then at the NTC level discussed this. We had the multi-stakeholders meeting. We included the APA. We translated the document into 9 indigenous languages for the consultation purpose. And then, in spite of all of this, we had the National Two Shows Council supporting it and agreeing that we should utilize the funds equitably. That is not only for villages that have forests, but also all indigenous communities, including those in the savannas, must benefit. In spite of all of that, the APA on its own went off and tried to block the funds. And they wrote the Architecture for Red Plus Transaction Secretariat. Yes, there was a review done, and the arguments made by APA were rejected, basically, because they were patently false. And they abrogated for themselves the responsibility of speaking on behalf of indigenous people, and claimed that the NTC, a forum of all elected leaders, did not have the right to speak for indigenous people. But you have a gathering of 242 villages where elected leaders were all represented, supporting the program. APA, it doesn't even have, we've traced how much funding they've received from abroad in the past 10 years. I'm told it's over $10 million US. Not a cent goes to the indigenous villages, but they were the sole, they have the right to speak. They're on behalf of the indigenous communities, and the National Two Show Council didn't have that right. Look at the newspapers, the arrogance of it in their letters to the newspaper, including Janet Bulkan, the sister of a former minister under APNU. She resides in Canada, but speaks about indigenous people and their rights and whether they should reject the funds and that we have done something illegal. Notwithstanding all of this, of the 15% of the first tranche of the money that we receive, $150 million from the sale, was given to the villages, in all 242 villages, and it came up to about $4.7 billion. Now, a requirement to utilize the funds, or some requirements to utilize the funds and account for them, had to be observed by the villages. So first of all, they had to submit a village plan for the utilization of the money. They had to submit along with the plan the minutes of the meeting that they had in the village to discuss the plan. They had to show the signing sheet for the people who attended the meeting. And they had to demonstrate that 2/3 of the village supported the plan. So, and then they had to sign an opt-in letter. So in spite of the APA saying the villagers don't take the money, etc., 238 of the 242 villages have submitted all of these documents. And they've already benefited from the resources. We've had 2.6 billion of the 4.7 drawn down already, and we anticipate by the end of the year, most of it would be expended. So this, if you listen to the two shows, you will hear about how transformative these funds have been in their communities, apart from the support that they've received directly from the government through tractors and all of that sort of thing, the direct support. But these funds alone have made a huge impact in these villages. And it would be, I hope that there'll be a public, maybe, or the presentations by the two shows will be made public when they spoke about these funds and how the funds have been helping. Next year, these communities will get another 2.6 because we received $87 million. And this next year would be the lowest year. And then this will go up to 2030. So every year they will get these funds. But this is only for 30%. So potentially, if we extrapolate, these communities could receive over 10 years, if we were to sell the forest carbon at the same price that we did in the Hess deal, they would receive over $400 million US. They would receive in a 10-year period, which is a lot of money, and more than. In fact, they've said that this 1 year, under the funds they receive, more funding that their entire villages receive on the APNU in 5 years. That is through all of their programs. So they have seen a massive increase in the regular government programs, and then on top of this all here. So I thought we'd be given credit for converting what would have been a liability to Guyana, the Green State Strategy, because under the Green State Strategy, we had to fund our activities. There was no means of earning resources. And it focused a lot on what I call the surface issues, planting trees, painting buildings green, nonsense, pure nonsense. We have converted that into an asset, our forest and its ability to extract carbon. Actually, that's not even the case, because what we are doing now, we're getting paid for avoided deforestation. I'm trying not to get too technical, but there is a whole range of other credits that we are working on now, which is categorized separately, and we're trying to create a market for that called removals. So first of all, we're being paid for this concept called avoided deforestation. That is good practice. And we've generated the credits through that engagement. And we're working now, we're going to submit our reference level soon to the UN to look. We every year conservatively estimated our trees remove about 154 million tons of CO2 equivalent from the atmosphere. And so we are trying to create a market for that. If we can, we could possibly raise another maybe 3 billion. This could become a 5 billion US sector. Now, when you look at it, the size of that, the magnitude of this is a huge sum of money for Ghana. And so we're working on that now, but that's for the future. So we're busy looking at the reference levels and our submission to the UN, etc. So I thought this would have been a thing that everyone would support. The APA had to go on and rain on the parade, because that's what they often do. They just sit here in Georgetown. Now, they've been lying to many of the communities. One, Tushau, I think he's a member of the APA. There's a few of them there. And it's interesting in their presentation what they raised, because one said that we don't speak the language. APA helps us to our people, a lot of them, help us to translate. And I have a hard time signing an agreement like this, because the villages are told that I'm signing on to a debt and they will have to repay it later. So that the money that they receive, the grant basically under the LCDS, they're told it's a debt. And if your Tushau signs on to this, you would have to pay. So the Tushau was scared. He's saying, I don't want to sign this thing, because am I signing a debt that I have to repay, or my village would have to repay in the future? That's the lie, the scaremongering that they pursue there. But clearly, they're not working in the best interest of indigenous people, working for themselves. Now, we have heard over the past week, we've seen a lot of issues on the sugar workers. And I see a number of reports on a strike taking place. So someone sent me this morning, I think the Minister of Agriculture, what Ramjatan has been saying, and they sent me some photos of a protest yesterday. We are now here at the office of the president, of Ramjatan and a crooked individual called Derek Basdeo with him, who was from the AFC. He was one of the people trying to hit Sharon Das in the parliament. He was not a member of parliament, but sat there in the gallery. They showing up with the protesters and claiming they wanted to see the president. So he sent me something, and then apparently Ramjatan was on one of the programs, and he said the following things. That one, the government is refusing to meet 349 workers. I didn't see 349 workers come here. So that we are reluctant to talk to sugar workers. Now, this is Ramjatan saying this. And then he said that this may largely be because many of them are black sugar workers, and that there's an ethnic pattern in the government. Now, everybody knows Ramjatan has to sing for his supper. But by saying this, I started thinking that he is claiming, and so let me tell you all that he said on the program before I get into that. So he said, and there's a direct quote, the PPP on top of that loaded them, the sugar workers, with an extra 250 million compensation package. Actually, it's not 250 million. It was $1.7 billion. He had it wrong. It was 250,000 per person. So yes, it's true. It was a lot, but we loaded the sugar workers with that. But these guys, almost 349 of them, didn't get anything. They did not take the severance, neither did they get the compensation package to ease them out of the harshness and so on. So first of all, Ramjatan is saying we loaded up with the sugar workers with the money. Now, if you go to the Hansards of the parliament, every attempt to help sugar and sugar workers has been opposed by the APNU AFC coalition, and they have opposed any funding to sustain the industry. They have voted almost in every instance against funding. Their arguments, including Ramjatan's argument, is that this is a black hole. Sugar industry is a black hole. Now, having the duplicity of it all coming from a Ramjatan, who argued in the past for the closure of many estates, who justified laying off 7,000 sugar workers by calling it, they were not terminating, they were right-sizing the industry. But we know the plan. They closed some estates, and then they told the managers no capital investment in the other estates. So eventually, all of the estates would have been closed. It was as transparent as daylight. And they were the ones who promised in 2015 no closure. They said PPP were lying to the sugar workers. They closed the work industry, sent home many estates, sent home several thousand workers, so they can't be believed. And then they were closing the other estates. So no job in the industry was going to be safe. The second thing is that they sold out the assets at Wales. We don't need to go back there to the scrap iron, give away the land, and more sold out or leased out all of the housing assets to people close to APNU. They refused to pay the severance for the sugar workers at Wales. We had to go to court. We were part of the protest in front of Parliament to get the sugar workers their severance because they were severed. They raised a lot, transferred the assets of Gaisuko to Nisil, and raised a lot of money on the strength of those assets, invested the assets. They spent over 100 million on some swimming pool at LBI and all of that sort of thing. That's the history. So Ramjatan, and I got back to thinking that if he's saying that the PPP is not meeting with these sugar workers, the reason, let me go back to his statement. He said, these 349 guys did not get nothing. They did not take the severance, neither did they get the compensation package to ease them out of harshness. So what harshness is he talking about? First of all, they did not get the severance because they were not severed. APNU transferred them to Blaymont and to Albion. So there is no issue of paying severance because they were not severed. So not that they had to take the severance, they had an option. Then APNU refused to pay severance to those who were actually severed, lost their jobs. These workers did not lose their jobs, so they couldn't get severance. But even those who lost their jobs, they couldn't get their severance. And what we gave was $250,000 to all the workers who were severed, because the severance was a pittance. And we argued that when we had to, of necessity, because of the Minproc arrangement that Desmond Hoyt had signed with the Linden workers, when they were severed, we gave them way beyond what the severance calculations came to, as an incentive, basically, because we thought it was too low. We did it in the past, and we did it to the workers who were severed. So It wasn't compensation. It was to add to the severance. These workers were not severed, and they were not eligible for severance, nor were they terminated. So they didn't have a period of unemployment like the others who were severed from 2018, 1st of January, were severed. They didn't have unemployment. So that is the issue. And then what harshness is he talking about? It's the harshness imposed by APNU on the people of the industry because they sent them home without any regard for social welfare. So when you bring, and really, this sugar workers, this is like the Kool-Aid again. The same people who destroyed the industry turn up now, Ramjatan and the others, with no credibility whatsoever. So he told the people, the sugar workers, he's going to get them to come here and speak with Ali. Now, he couldn't get the sugar workers to meet Granger, and he was part of the coalition. And do you think President Ali would have want to see Ramjatan anywhere in his office or anybody he brings to talk about sugar, given their track record, this sordid history of destruction of the industry? And the workers who brought him here to, or were led by him, they are part of the Kool-Aid too. I'm not making it clear, because if they think that they forgot the short history of the sugar industry and would bring a person like Ramjatan, have him lead them here to talk about sugar, they got to be crazy if they think we're going to engage with them on that basis to bring Ramjatan. They have no conscience that the man who helped was justifying the destruction of the industry suddenly turns up at save. Or the reason they have a job now, these same 349 of them, is because the PP came back into office, or else they would have no job whatsoever. So this is every single time you go to Parliament, they should read the Hansards. I didn't want to go through the Hansards today. Take a long time. I got a stack of them. And if you go through them, you will see that they've always opposed sugar. So it has nothing to do with race. It has absolutely. And if he's talking about race, is it that APNU handpick only the Afro-Guyanese and transfer them and then terminated the Indians? Because that's what he is saying. The people who were transferred were Afro-Guyanese. So they were transferred to Blaymont and Albion, and the Indo-Guyanese terminated. That is basically what he's implying. He's implying that. So who is racist? Who is racist? Ramjatan has not an ounce of credibility, and then he will come to the office of the president, want to bring the sugar workers and promise them that. The other issue I want to speak about would be maybe before I go on to that, but by the way, I see don't get to the opposition yet. Let me just go and deal with the oil and gas and then come back to the opposition. So last week, a number of issues were raised with me. And so I spoke with the head of GRA, because every week this issue keeps coming up about a statement he made at the Public Accounts Committee and about the need to have qualified people to do the audits, and he can't find them here in Guyana. So I said to him, you need to deal with this matter yourself. Because the impression is created that somehow you need these people and the government is not supportive. And I've confirmed that you've never basically raised this matter with the Minister of Finance nor the President directly at a policy level. He said to me that they advertise locally and internationally, but the rates are very high. So I said, but you should discuss this if it's a humbug to your work. He confirmed to me that it was this government that has been supportive in creating the unit and expanding and staffing it. But he is going to deal with this matter. The reason I want him at the technical level to deal with matters surrounding audit is that I've made it clear that as politicians, we want to stay away from any issue dealing with audits. Often we're concerned about the timeline that they take. We want to see local content in the audit, but we don't want to give directions in relation to audit, which is an entirely technical matter. Because it would seem, if we intervene, it would seem we are favoring one party or another. And this is not how audits are done. And so that is why he should deal with it purely from a technical perspective. And our position remains the same. In relation to the Orinduke block that you asked me about last week, Iman, I've confirmed from the ministry. So I met with the ministry and with the GGMC too. So I've been asking them now to deal with all of these issues. So they need to now host a separate press conference to deal with a number of the issues surrounding the contract management as they relate to the prospecting licenses, all the outstanding ones, and the production license outstanding. The Orinduke issue, we have in principle agreed that the approval will be given for Tullow to sell its shares to ECO and to exit that block. In relation to Kanaku block, so a letter I gather came in, which many people are not aware of in the sector, came in since May of this year. And that letter sought not to relinquish, as many thought, but to request a renewal of the block, to get a new prospecting license. I can confirm that it was 10 years, the 10 years had expired. So in May, effectively the property was back with the government of Guyana. So the government of Guyana has had discussions with them this week that they should a policy decision be made, and therefore we still have not done so at the cabinet level. But should a policy decision be made that we will consider favorably their application for a new prospecting license in that area, that they would have to now comply with the new PSA, which is one, the size of the block has to be reduced. Two, there would have to be a signing bonus. And three, all of the other conditions, including enhanced royalty, the new fiscal conditions, every other condition of the new PSA would apply. That is, should the government decide to have a negotiated position. But given that what I've done in the past, I've always given you the variables that are available before the policymakers when we make decisions. So I told you about on the approach to the refinery, we're looking at two options. And here too, there's a counter argument that if we go on the negotiated route, and of course, if that you decide to award or to renegotiate, not to renegotiate, to renew the prospecting license, they'd also have to have a very aggressive development plan, because that's part of the competition, to have an aggressive development plan. That is exploration plan. They claim that they had already invested about $500 million in the block, 3 wells in the block. They have 3D seismic for the entire block. So just to say to Glenlal that if they don't get back this block, the $500 million US dollars expended here because they've not moved on to production, they lost every cent of it. And it's the government of Guyana does, or the people don't have to pay back for that, because it's the exploration activity is done at the risk of the investor. So they invested, we can verify the numbers, that's their figure, but they invested a substantial sum of money, and if they don't move forward to production, they lose all of it. So it's risky business too. So on the other hand, we have to look at, and people say to me, don't give all of these variables. But on the other hand, the counter arguments would be that if we have a negotiated approach to renewing blocks, then it could undermine the auction. And two, others may want to come in through that route in the future. So, and that we may not get the best deal out of a renegotiated. That is an aggressive exploration plan. On the other hand, the argument is if they're already there and they're committed to the block, they will move forward faster because they have intense knowledge of the area and they've already spent $500 million US. So I told you all of this. Now, just to give you an idea as to where we are. So once the ministry has had these engagements, they will come up with a set of recommendations to the cabinet. But you have an understanding of the policymakers' variables before them on their desks now as they go forward to make a decision. The next thing is, in this case, Tullow will still be part of the Kanaku. Tullow will remain part of the Kanaku block. Should they get a renewed, they're part of it now, and they will remain part of it if they get a renewed.
So it's the same consortium.
Yeah, yes, basically. So Tullow, although they walked away totally from the Orandu block, they are party to this application for renewal here in the Kanaku block. So those are some of the things that I wanted to mention. Now, I was tempted to say a couple of things, but about Norton, but I'm going to give him a rest this week because he went to New York and lied a bit there too. But what bothers me a lot is what he's been saying about that their party is bankrupt, effectively bankrupt, and they're looking for funding. So this is very telling. When a party just come out of government, of opposition, or government rather, in government, splurge a lot. I saw the cutlery that Congress players bought. In 100 years, we wouldn't have the cutlery branded this bone china and like branded with the party's logo and all kinds of fancy things. They splurged a lot. The new offices they built everywhere. The accounts, from what I gathered, that they are left with. And the extortion of businessmen for large sums of money that ostensibly would have gone to the party, or maybe that at least that was what they claim. And now today, you can't critique your phone calls in my press conference. I'm running the show here now today. So this is their position. I find it very strange. And for someone, he has now had the healthiest of tenure. He's been accused of, in fact, in the outreaches that the others seem to be doing, Amanda Walton making a vie for the leadership, cooking some food in some part of the country. I see some images and sharing out food. They're using all sorts of things. Roysdale Ford and another one going to say Norton is a bad man, fetching away all the party's money and all of that. And then Norton with a blank check matter himself. It doesn't engender a lot of confidence of people to give them money. So he's saying he doesn't want donation from big people, but a lot of the big people were extorted. And those even close to the APNU were extorted in the 5 years. So it's a sad shape when you say that about a party that's been around since the 1950s. And it has very limited prospects of winning power, given their policies, which we'll talk about, or lack of policies, which we'll talk about another time, like just saying, just reacting to the moment and playing to people's emotions without any real analysis. But what bothered me a lot is they accuse us of terminating Olata Sam. This is somehow, I can't even believe that people would believe something like this. So I had to download like a story from 2016 by Demerara Waves. It says, Olata Sam still reporting for work as Chief Education Officer despite announcement. Mr. Olata Sam is still on the job as Guyana's Chief Education Officer, although the Ministry of Education announced earlier this month that he would no longer be functioning in that capacity because his contract has ended. I can go down. That's what. They terminated him. And then it says here, prior to being appointed Chief Elections Officer by the then PPP civic government, right? He was technical advisor to the then Minister of Education, Priya Manikchand. So he's working in the ministry as a technical advisor. Then we put him as Chief Education Officer, APNU terminated him in 2016. And in September 2020, he was rehired as an education specialist. He lost his job in 2016 and got it back in 2020. And they say, now, I've seen this on social media and other places, it was sent to me, how could you all have done this to Olatasan? And people believe this. In general, when I look at the string of comments following the post, literally hundreds of people. And that's why I brought it here. Hundreds of people saying, oh yes, this racist government, PPP, they're terminating Afro-Guyanese, etc. And this was the story, and it's the Maraways in 2016. This is what APNU thrives on, like I said, the Kool-Aid gang. And Rickford Burke, I hope that people have been writing their congressmen and the others about the criminal acts he's been engaged in, especially organizing these events that he receives money for. He's renting a congressman, renting an official of the US government by collecting money on the side for people to meet them or get their pictures taken. He is going to end up in jail in the US. Here he's wanted already, but in the US for these things. And unfortunately, it dragged down a lot of the people who were associated with him. Unfortunately, that will happen because there would be a party. Many of them know he's not a registered agent on the FARA, and yet he's doing work as a lobbyist. And so they will, at some point in time, be caught up with it. I just have to end with the, let me don't need that. Thank you very much. Yes, please. All right, go ahead. Let me give Kaichur the first course.
Good afternoon, sir. Davina Bagat with Kaichur News. Concerns have been raised by civil society regarding the Stabber block projects being insured by an ExxonMobil-owned company. Do you believe those concerns are legitimate? And can you say for the record if government is comfortable with this arrangement?
You asked that question last year, and I responded. I'm not senile unless the reporters are senile. We were asked in the context of the audit about this related company. And do you recall this? You don't recall it? I will get the clip and I will send it to you and I'll post it, because if you don't recall that, and I think you were at the press conference, you need to make better notes about what you asked or Kaichur News asked. In the context of the audit, this came up. And one of the questions was whether the insurance was with a related company, and we spoke about this, and it's related. But that whether the premium paid, they had an industry specialist look at the premium that was paid, and whether that premium was higher than industry standard. And it was found to be within industry standard. So that question came up in the past and it was dealt with. That was what was asked of me. And the specialists look at it is in the context of the audit. Now, separately, we were asked about local content. And I also explained that local content, there's some aspects of the insurance that would come to locals and some aspects that will be held abroad. Because if the brokerage fee and the premium is higher than by passing it through a local broker, is higher than the premium that is currently being paid, then it comes out of cost oil and it reduces our share of profits. So I even answered that separately. So that's why I keep saying that the Starbucks Cultural News has a set of issues, and every week it's not new. It's circular. It goes around, you ask the same question and you get the same answers because that's our position. Next question.
I still didn't get clearly from you whether
No. Then the next question. Next question.
Okay, sir. Earlier you spoke about the carbon credit funds. Can you say what mechanism is in place to account for the spending of that revenue? And you also mentioned the new credits being pursued by government. I think you mentioned 3 billion. Is this figure is it US dollars, and would it be an annual sum or is it a cumulative sum over a period?
Yes. So the first one is that all of the resources have to be in a single account that would have audits, including international audit. So the 15% that goes to the indigenous people, we have to have accountability for that, and the 85% that remains. The 85% we said we want to use mainly for adaptation. We've been in the public domain. I explained this 100 times before. The 85% will go to adaptation to climate change. That means we spoke about a series of hope-like canals, a large number of cocers being rehabilitated, greater pumping capacity to manage water in several regions. So that's where the funds would go, and they would have to be audited, and we'd have to demonstrate internationally that these audits are taking place. So that is in terms of the resources. Secondly, there's a new front. We've been in pioneering work for the last 15 years, trying to create first a room for HFLD countries, Guyana, Suriname, Gabon. Up to earlier this week, we were talking about a joint approach on reference levels to the UN among the HFLD countries, which is like the three biggest ones are Guyana, Suriname, and Gabon. But then you saw what happened, disputed elections, and now a coup d'etat in Gabon. And so I doubt we'd be able to move forward jointly. We may have to move forward on our own. But we've been in this, and it's painstaking work, every year making some progress to get forest carbon recognized. We had to fight the prevailing sentiment in the international community that this deforestation could be addressed for free as an abatement solution, but other abatement solutions can get a lot of international funding. And we believe it's discriminatory because tropical forests are in third world countries mainly. Second, so we fought against that prevailing convention. Two, we had to fight against some NGOs that believe that if you put forest carbon on the market, it would allow the developed world to lower their ambition or to offset their aggressive ambition with credit from the developing world. And that single-handedly, plus this other view about whether there's permanence to forest carbon and whether it's measurable, those have, until now, have worked against us in the formal UNFCCC arrangement, worked against us having forest carbon being used as an offset in compliance market. So just to give you an idea as the price in compliance market for a ton of credit, like a ton of carbon, if in the EU ETS in February of this year, it was traded at 100 euros per ton, 100 euros per ton, because you can offset that carbon for your projects. You can, carbon bought in that market can be used as an offset for your emissions elsewhere. Because UN has not agreed to this as yet, because of a big fight by many countries, we now were stuck with a voluntary market. And on the voluntary market, it's just $4 a ton because people buy it, they still can't use it to offset their emissions. So we progressively had to move from creating the conditions for it, launching our LCDS, getting HFLD countries recognized because they have a different model than countries like Indonesia and the others, where they're reducing deforestation. In our case, we already have the intense forest cover. So we are preserving forests. It's a conservation model versus reducing the deforestation, which is the other model. We had to create momentum around this model, get a reference level that Guyana has contributed to significantly, get certification for it, and now, as a result of this, we're where we are today. And we've led this practically globally because we're the only country that has had such a trading arrangement. We led the conceptual work, the development, and all of that. We've been a major part of it. And that doesn't get recognized. Now, separate from all of this, and there is, if you look at our LCDS, I don't have it here, you would see there are 4 elements to it. And you will see conserve, and then you see one aspect, removal. Now, there is no market so far for the removals. So that is something now for countries like ours, the HFLD, we're now going to try to create a market, even in the voluntary markets, for that, because there's no compliance market. And that is why, for market development generally, in the context of UNFCCC, the negotiations in Dubai this year will be critical, and Article 6 of the agreement that deals with market. It's important that that be advanced. But they're dealing with general markets. We're still having a hard time getting forest carbon into that market. So we have to, first of all, we estimate, or conservatively, our removal to be 154 million tons per annum. And so if you sold that into a market that is a compliance market, it would raise large sums of money. Currently priced at the EU price, it would raise not 3 billion US, maybe 40, 50 billion US dollars. But we are realistic. And so we think that over time, so it's not going to happen tomorrow. That's why I'm saying it's a new set of conceptual work and arguments, new reference levels, demonstrated that they also, the removals may have an impact on carbon. And then from some of the removals, we can then offset our, for example, oil and gas production here in Guyana, with us producing 1.6 billion barrels, but we will probably use between 16 to 20 million tons of that. So we can offset our own emissions and still be carbon neutral. But that's conceptual work down the road, and it's US dollars I'm speaking about. So don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. We're intensely involved in discussions globally and here working at the technical level to get this sort of thing done. And it's pushing against a large group of countries and technicians from abroad too, who are sometimes narrow in their thinking, and they don't want to allow any new arrangement that where the developed world would have to pay for these things. to come in to the table. So we have major battle here.
Thank you, sir. Finally, for me, Exxon has commenced the application process for a sixth project. Can you say what additional benefits, fiscal benefits that is, Guyanese can look forward to? And as we continue to sanction more developments in the Stabroek Block, considering its size, will government ring fence any of the projects in the future?
Asked and answered 100 times before. 100 times before. I'm not going to go through this again.
Yes.
Yes.
Cassie Henry, DPI. Dr. Jagdeo, could you say where government is on implementing the recommendations from the Human Rights Commission in relation to the Chinese landing issue? And additionally, could you provide an update on the fact-finding mission into Chinese landing, whether that is completed and if there's a report from that council? And finally, has government responded to the commission since receiving its report?
As to where we are at this exact moment, I know the investigations have not been completed. I know we had an initial engagement with the commission to say that we intend to fully comply. I know that the report is not completed as yet, but I know also that we have taken steps, strong steps, to address the identified issues that we were written about. And so I had a private discussion with the Tushao from Chinese landing. And then at the NTC itself, an issue came up because a lot of the villagers from the village now are saying they don't agree with his action. So you have a lot of confusion. And I said we didn't want to get caught up at the NTC with internal village conflict between different parties in the villages. Seems as though some people from the village support Wayne Vera. Some others believe that the Tushao and others have monopolized mining. You have another group that strongly believes that supports the Tushao. So you have different groups, different positions. We're trying to stay away from those village issues. I explained to him under the NTC that this matter that went to the commission had nothing to do or had very little to do with Vera. Because it seems as though the argument being made now is that they only wanted action taken against Vera. But that matter was already adjudicated in the highest court, which is comparable to for Guyana, is comparable to the commission. It seems as though that the matter that went before the commission was that, one, that the impact of mining in the area is causing pollution, that the miners are harassing people and causing a whole range of social problems, including threatening them. And so, you're doing the Vera matter, we stood on the side of the village all along, throughout it, but the CCJ ruled against us. So that's a separate matter. So to cure the breach, there's only one way you can do that. Since the source of this claim that of pollution and harassment is mining, then the government of Guyana took these steps to shut down the mining activities there. And therefore, there can be no pollution, continuing breach, and there'll be no harassment because there'll be no miners there. Now, I spoke with GGMC and they said they found 9 operations, private illegal operations there. All of that was shut down. So it seems as though now what the Tushao is saying, and a group closed team, is that allow only us to mine, but shut down the others. But that's not what they argue there, because mining wherever it's done could be causing the pollution from anyone. So that's where we are now. That we have cured the breach, what went before the commission, and now we have to find out. That's why the investigations were there, whether the claims made before the Human Rights Commission, whether those were accurate or not. And that's where the report, when it's submitted, would give us the findings of the report, which has not been concluded as yet, as far as I know. But we have cured the source of the problem, which is the mining. And therefore, this is what our approach to this. So I had to explain to the two shows about this matter because a lot of false information went to them. No doubt a number of people been spreading this. Yes.
From Guyana Chronicle, during a press conference last week, Ramjatan said that while he was serving as Minister of Public Security, he issued 39 firearm licenses in 2020 without the board's approval. He claimed that they were scared to meet because of COVID. Can you comment on this?
If you ask me about Ramjatan and gun licenses, they're much, much more that we need. If you do a proper investigative report, then you would find out what really happened. And Ramjatan likes to present himself as above it all, but there were lots of problems there, lots of corruption. Actually, there was a figure attached to particular types of weapon, how much you had to pay individuals closely associated with the AFC to get these licenses. And even to get a security license as a security company, people had to pay large sums of money to them. So Ramjatan gave, just before they left, after he had confessed that the PPP won the elections, and then later, although recorded, he later said he didn't say that. This is how dishonest he is. He was caught saying goodbye to his staff. Thank you very much. The PPP won the elections. And then he later said he didn't say that. And we had the recording of it and it was played. That's the person we're dealing with. A lot of those licenses were issued. It would be interesting to ask him the names of the 39 people. And then you would see whether they went through a proper process. I know some of them, and they are very close to the AFC. Some of the people who got licenses. But if you dig into that, you would see a massive cesspool of corruption. The licenses in his period. Good afternoon.
Could you possibly say at this point, if you said that you had discussions with the GRA head in relation to the complement of the audit, could you possibly say if this has anything to do with the cost recovery audit for Exxon's 2017 report?
No, the cost recovery audit was done by a separate company. The cost recovery audit was done by a separate company. IHS Market did the first one, and I explained last week about where they are, but I said that the ministry and the GRA will speak more to that issue. And then the second one was done by a consortium of Guyanese that we insisted and a foreign company together. So those were completed, and they are completed within a relatively short period. And then they were sent to the GRA. I know they have had a look at it. I can't say exactly if that's part of the delay, but it could be some of the delays there. But I explained that probably the longest period in concluding these audits of this nature is that if you identify large sums, and large sums you saw, Stabrook reported this, were reported in the 4 categories. The one category where the expenditure they didn't agree with was small. The one where they didn't provide enough documentation was the largest category of disagreement. And therefore, sent that iterative process between the parties to get the document. They say, what else you need? And then they would send that over. And then our side would say, that's still not enough. The iterative process takes some time. So when Stacia addresses this matter, he should do so in greater detail. And let him tell you what are some of the considerations there. But as I said before, whilst we want to get this done, we don't want to compromise the standards and the diligence because of pushing people to conclude it speedily. Because if you push for a speedy conclusion, they may miss certain things.
Dr. Jagdeo,
for TBN. A growing number of Guyanese are becoming frustrated. I've received messages through comments, messages through WhatsApp, as it relates to 3 concerns that are frustrating Guyanese. Kaicho news, very depressing. The hot sun, and now your press conferences that are playing into Kaicho news narratives. A number of depressing states. People want to know about roads. People want to know about cost of living. When are you going to get back on track with the government's work as it relates to what the government is doing for Guyanese?
Okay. It's hard to... what I do here is not for Kaicho News. I do it for the people of this country, because Kaicho News will continue to distort. They will continue to distort because you have a politician who's using the newspaper as his campaign tool. And watch out for it. It's going to happen. At some point in time, we've heard this before from everyone. It's going to launch a party, and you're going to see a flocking of the crooks together. All of the Flotsams and Jetsams will come out, and you will see that all have a history, because I've seen some of them already. They all have a history of duping people, or some of the most criminal past that they've had, from pedophilia to all sorts of things. So that's inevitable. The newspaper is a political organ of someone who has ambition. Secondly, he's very ignorant. So he has made, as I said before, ignorance a virtue. He doesn't understand anything complex. You've been a reporter here. You yourself have said, can't conceptualize issues, much less write about them. But he gets some like-minded people to write for him. And of course he pays, and people see that as a business. So I'm not doing this for Kaicho News. Unfortunately, a lot of people, or there is 5% of our population that would believe the weirdest things in the world. And I don't want them to be part of a Kool-Aid phenomenon. So that's why I just looked through, because I was planning to get to them. Like, I brought some of these things. That's why I said earlier I didn't get the oil block extensions. For example, editorial, August 30th. My name is mentioned about 20 times that I made the decision. We agreed already here. Everybody knows that Granger extended the blocks for three, Kanji, Kaitshore, and Stabroek. But he says the crucial decisions in the Vita have been screen shaped, etc., that I extended the block. He continues to say this. And 120 blocks now he has gone. But there's 120 blocks I've extended. So that's number one. More than media, another editorial, 31st. This is, again, the extension, Jagdeo again, here. Jagdeo allowed the extension here. Each household can receive at least 1 million annually had Jagdeo ring-fence oil projects. Now, it's Trotman who signed this agreement. Trotman did not ring-fence anything. We just crafted and published a new PSA that has small blocks, so you don't need to ring-fence, very small blocks. It's Trotman who did this, but Jagdeo did not ring-fence project. Obsession. So this here, AFC demands on-site monitoring of oil production. Another clung, Vincent Adams. This one here, I've said to you 100 times the last 3 weeks, 3 press conferences, that's the next phase. We were working at putting in place the framework, and now we have to go to do this. It's just like the Stabroek editorial. After I suggested strategic oil reserves, then they suggested it, some technical person. Now he's suggesting that we go. He demands it. AFC demands this. So all of this. So Kaitshore News will not change. You have a clung that ends it, and therefore, what I do here is sort of people, and I don't want to treat the reporters badly, so that's why I respond to their questions too.
Dr. Jagdeo, after what the opposition leads reached out to citizens in Maryland recently in the diaspora and was reaching out to Guyanese, is the government worried they might be financing the opposition through programs where they're supporting citizens? Because the opposition, when they were in government, they took away the program for $10,000 per school child. Now persons are having $40,000. And it seems that the opposition is going after that money to finance their programs. Would the government be considering who they're giving these monies to make sure it don't end up in the opposition hands?
Yeah. Listen, I think they picked the pockets of the big people already, and now they're trying to pick pockets of small people. So, but really, it's hard. So they go abroad, they raise some money, they hire a PR firm. They probably get a company to pay for the PR firm that they would make promises to. We've seen that they make lots of promises to. And they, in the period, people don't realize that some of the Trinidadian companies that came here, that the leadership of APNU was hosting several activities over there and were getting large sums of money from these companies. That's why they did not want to pass the local content law. APNU opposed it We were fighting for this local content law from opposition. Today, 1,500 Guyanese companies have benefited from this. Over 400 million US the oil companies have to spend here. Some people, thousands of people who are employed now in the sector because of that law, which forces the oil companies to procure goods and services from Guyanese. So had we not done that, they would have gone on their old merry way. But they opposed it because their donors were opposed to it. And that is, they would sell out national interests for any reason. Norton goes off to North America. He's facing intense challenges. But if he raises $100 million, trust me, it's not coming back to the PNC. It's not coming back to the PNC. So giving money to APNU is like it's a waste of time because it never gets done a thing for the party activities. Imagine they can't hold a general council meeting because they don't have $2.4 million to convene a general council meeting. How bad can you get? It's either he is saying this for sympathy among people, I know, because the underdog sometimes gets some sympathy, they don't have money, it's an unfair advantage, or really it's shocking to me. So whatever he says in Maryland or Queens, New York, etc., they can't stand. He talks about the racism there, about the local government elections reflected a massive loss for the PPP. That's what he's been telling people abroad. I have the transcript of it. A massive loss for the PPP, that the 18 million signing bonus, that the PPP knew about this money. I look at what he said abroad. Today, I didn't want to respond to all of what Norton has been saying, but the lies have become part of their daily arsenal. And they're trying to reposition themselves as being pro people. They're not. They demonstrated it several times.
Dr. Jagdeo, former Prime Minister Tony Blair was recently in Guyana. Were there any benefits through the meetings for Guyanese, or it was just a formal visit? What was that about?
So he came here, I guess, at the invitation of Mr. Lamy, who was launching this Rainforest Lodge and or activity there. I think it's called Sophia Center. And we had good meetings with him. Tony Blair does a lot of work internationally, particularly in the Middle East, and he has an extensive network. He has an organization now with probably close to 1,000 people that works with him. And so often in the international community, that matters, that a benign view of our country and our people and its prospects and potential and possibilities, that if these get fed through the organizations that have broad reach, then they would in the long run redound to the benefit of all the people of the country. And so from that perspective, it was great to engage him, to share views on several matters, on global developments, on the COP that is upcoming in UAE. We had some really good discussions. And then also to talk a bit about the past, because when he was prime minister, we had some engagements. Actually, it was the first person I wrote to about, this was in 2006 or 2007, about the LCDS and our forest. And then I met with Gordon Brown, who was his successor, and then Prime Minister Stoltenberg. That's how we got it going, the first LCDS. But in that period when he was there, we had a number of engagements at the Commonwealth. So, and even on the debt relief, I pointed out to him that I was Minister of Finance when we had the Jubilee 2000 march in the UK. And it was Middle England coming out to protest about the debt burden and to write off the debts for developing countries. So I spoke in the cathedral in Birmingham, and there was a person called Anne Pettifor who was heading the movement. So he was hosting the G8 meeting at that time in the UK. And then because it became such a big issue, he sent and met with us. I was only government rep at that time, and with the NGO. And from there, it went on to the multilateral debt relief became part of the agenda. It got mentioned in the G8 brief, and then subsequently, the IFIs pursued it, because prior to that, you only had debt relief through the Paris Club arrangement, which is a bilateral arrangement. The multilateral institutions never gave debt relief because they said it would create a situation of moral hazard, and therefore they didn't do it. So it's good to catch up on those days and how we've managed to get again Guyana fashion something. I just need to say this because debt relief, when it came out first by the IFIs, was for the criterion that they were using was the burden on the external account, the balance of payment. So they were looking at debt service to export ratio. Our debt service to export ratio was not that bad. It was bad, but wasn't the worst in the world. So we were not going to be eligible. And then, so we argued, and we got Kenneth Clark, who was the chancellor at that time in the UK, and Paul Martin, who was Minister of Finance, who subsequently became the Prime Minister of Canada. I met with them there in Bermuda at a Commonwealth Finance Ministers Conference, and they assisted with France through Ivory Coast. And we managed to change the multilateral criteria for according debt relief, because in our case, the burden on the fiscal was unbelievable. We were using scheduled debt service was more than 100% of revenue, the worst in the world. Yet we were not going to qualify. And then the multilaterals changed from that, just the burden on the external, to burden on the fiscal. And that is how we qualified and for debt relief under that. Very interesting period for our development. A lot of these stories don't get told because they were part of our journey from bankruptcy to probably the fastest growing economy in the world today, from a bankrupt country to where we are today. But a lot of side stories about what took place behind the scenes never get told, about how tough it was to fashion even international arrangements to assist our countries. So those were interesting discussions, because he was their prime minister at that time when some of it took place. Yeah, yes.
Can you say if the government has made a decision to reissue proposals for the Amalia Falls hydropower project? And do you think this will somehow affect the government's ability to provide cheaper electricity to Guyanese?
Okay, so right now we have several proposals, direct proposals. some even coming in. You recall that with the Chinese, when we went to tender, it was just over 7 cents per kilowatt hour to buy power from them. And then subsequently, they had difficulty raising the financing. And so they wanted to change from selling power to an EPC where they would bill for us. And we said, but that's not what you bid for. And we annulled the bid. So we have subsequently had offers around the same magnitude, about 7 cents per kilowatt hour, from bilateral sources. But there are several of them. So when you have several proposals, the best way to evaluate is to go to a competitive process. We have not. We will have to go to that. We haven't launched it as yet, but we'll have to do that. It will not affect our ability in the short run to supply additional power. So Amila Falls would have brought in about 160 megawatts of power. That is when APNU killed that, they were supposed to replace it with 160 megawatts from some other source. They did not. And so that is why we even have to revise our NDC, because they said 100% renewable by 2025 with zero project to accomplish it. So the Wales project will generate up to about 300 megawatts power. We believe that we be able, when we bring the demand that is met privately to the demand, GPL demand, and then the growth because of cheaper electricity. You know, when you have cheaper electricity, which will be by 50%, about somewhere around 11 cents per kilowatt hour, that would allow, that would increase demand. People put in more things, appliances, AC and stuff. So you'd have a rapid growth. At some point in time, we'd have to look for other projects that come on stream constantly. Could be expansion just there at the site because we'd have additional gas. Amila would be part of the mix. The solar, 33 megawatts of solar will come in. Hopefully the bid would be completed before the end of the year. We're looking at another 25 megawatts of solar along the highway. You know, some countries you see along the highway, they have the solar panels, 25 megawatts there. So a mix of different things, but it will not affect our ability in the next several years to supply power once the Wales comes on stream, nor the price at which we said we want people to have. I can't tell you exactly because we're in like a lot of things at the same time. You know, we're working on several policy issues, but that's the intention. I can tell you the intention, and it will happen at some point.
Good afternoon, Vice President Kimal King, Oil Now. On the matter of the audits of costs at GRA, could you give an idea of what is like the scale of difference between the market rates for auditors that you say are so high compared to what is being paid to state auditors?
That's what I said. You're taking me right back to something that I want Stacia to address, because the whole controversy is come out because of what statement he made. And so, as I said before, he will address this. I spoke with him about addressing it directly.
Okay, on Repsol, could you give insight into what is causing them to want to return to the Kanuku block so much, given that they haven't made any commercial discoveries in the 10 years that they've had the block? Have they explained that to you?
Well, they spent a lot of money already. So that's one. They have 3D seismic. And the rest you'd have to ask them about. So I think they want to continue the activities there. They must have seen some potential for discoveries. That is why they want the prospecting license renewed. So I think it's clearly an interest that they believe, based on their reading of the seismic, that the area has great potential.
Okay. You spoke about the fact that the government is seeking to market a new type of credits being developed for removals. So
No, we're not marketing it. That's what I want to be careful. That's why sometimes when I explore the concept, it gets reflected in a way. I said we have to create the conditions conceptually, globally. We are far away from even marketing the credit.
Okay.
You have to have an acceptance of it, and then create a market for it before you could actually market it. You understand? So we're conceptually at that stage dealing with this issue.
So now that the credits that are being marketed are making money, do you see the chances that this new system that you are proposing, do you see that the chances would be high enough for you to get this new system accepted, given that you're already making money?
But the thing is that it's not about making money. It is about climate change and abatement solutions. And the contribution made by every source to mitigation efforts and abatement solutions must be recognized equally and paid for by the global community. They're paying for other abatement solutions already. So this abatement solution can come for free, not because it exists in the developing world.
Okay, finally, have you also had discussions on the matter of the Orandu block with ECHO that's supposed to take over the majority stake, because they plan to explore and they also plan to farm out once Tullow leaves? Have you recently had talks with them on that matter?
Well, the thing is that they've agreed they would have to complete the plan that was put to us. So all the requirements of the original agreement, I think it expires in 2026, they would have to comply with the work program. So what is happening is not a changing of the work program, it's just changing of the ownership of the block.
What I really wanted to know is if you perhaps had an idea of who they wanted to bring in.
That is premature. Right now, there is one thing before us, that is to approve the transfer of the ownership or the sales of the shares from Tullow to ECO.
Okay.
Just two questions.
Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Kiana Wilberg, Culture News. Sir, we've seen the experience of possible abuse of exemptions granted in the oil and gas sector. And with the scale at which the sector is moving, can you say how the government plans to counter future attempts in this regard? And secondly, with regard to the relinquishment, I know the Ministry of Natural Resources would have said that the one-year extension did not apply to Kanji and Kaichor. So based on the provisions of the contracts, Exxon would have had to relinquish portions from these two blocks. Can you say where, and this should have happened last year actually, can you say where government is on that?
So first of all, on the exemptions. Now, GRA polices exemptions. So GRA should aggressively ensure that the exemptions are used only for the dedicated purposes. That's GRA's job, to police exemptions, to see that people are not abusing this. We've had cases, and including from reputable companies that have abused this. You recall with the recycling of the gas, fuel. And one company had to pay in excess of $3 billion, a recognized company now that is is a big company, a company that's located here. So this is GRA has to police those exemptions. And I'm told the discussion I've had with Sisha, because he said to me, on the regular GRA, I have adequate staff. In fact, I may have even too much. It is the petroleum unit that he had the problem with, but not so much on the GRA regular staff that looks at exemptions and customs and the other stuff. So he should have the capability now in-house to look at this aggressively, every contract, and to make sure that there are systems in place. So on the Kanji block, so far, let me make it clear. I've asked the ministry, have you written formally to notify that there is no extension for Kanji and Kaichor? The answer is no. So I saw the headline in the Kaichor news that that has been done. They have not formally. The Stabroek block was extended, what they told me, on the basis of what I mentioned to you. Granger's extension, Granger extended it, and then there was justification. I mentioned some key elements of it last week. They were supposed to have 6 drill ships operating offshore, only managed to procure 4. They had to consolidate operation on 3 for a while because of COVID. So it affected an original plan. I heard that there was no similar justification for Kanji and Kaichor, but they have not formally concluded that matter. And I just want to be clear about this. They've not formally concluded that as yet. I suspect if there is no justification, it didn't affect any program, then that's clear. On Kanji, there was a relinquishment. The Kanji, there was a relinquishment in 2022 of about 1,292 square kilometers. My information is that, it was 6,100 square kilometers, and now it's 4,808. In the Kaichor block, there was no relinquishment. And what I'm told is that, there are 2 in 2013 or 2014. One of the Anadarko had one of its vessels, I think Technic Perdana, was seized or had trouble with Venezuela. Now, their exploration, that block, was the Roraima block, had a contiguous border with Venezuela. And so too is the Kaichor block, has a contiguous border with Venezuela. And therefore, there was a side letter when that happened. There was a side letter to deal with careful exploration in that area until those matters could be resolved. So it has implications for our border issue. I don't want to say more about it. But because of what happened with the Roraima block and the seizure of that vessel in 2013 or 2014, and given the same geography, that it may have affected their relinquishment. We'll talk about, because I have to review all of that now. and we will probably give more details, but I suspect they're up for relinquishment too by now.
But that is on a pause until.
Well, I'm not saying pause. I'm just giving you the facts, and I will have to review the facts at this time. So that's for these two, Kaichor and then Kanji actually did relinquish.
Can I get clarity on that for a second?
I'm not dealing with anything more on the board.
On Kanji.
Yeah, right, oh, Kanji.
You said there was a relinquishment in 2022 of 1,200 and something.
This is
square
my
kilometers.
information from the ministry. Yeah.
And that is relinquishment from the original 6 to 100.
Yeah.
It was in 2015 that the contract was granted, and so the first phase would have expired in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would have been the first relinquishment of the 1,200 something due in 2019.
So I'm just telling you, this is my information today that I got from them, from the technical people.
Okay.
And so there was a relinquishment. Now on Starbrook, I see a lot of talk, but if you look at the trace Starbrook, 1999, it's a 10 years prospecting license. So you should have relinquished sometime in 2009. But then they had this force majeure. And so then they went to, I think it's 2007 that they resumed operation. But what happened, so if it's 2007, it should be 2017, 2018, that the agreement signed by Trotman reset the whole clock. And people don't deal with that. This Kaichor news, don't pay no attention to that. That how Trotman reset the whole clock. They're worried about, they're misrepresenting that Jagdeo extended, but we didn't extend. But how Trotman extended the entire block basically by resetting the agreement when you sign in 2016, everything, new periods. So it's something that people don't like. Of course, they have no interest in doing that because Trotman is the new guru for Glen Lal. No.
Good afternoon, sir. Rihanna Ramsey, Kaiser News. I have three questions. The first one is, given that Guyana is already struggling to audit the expenses of oil companies, OGGN had proposed a new model agreement that would help allow for Guyana
Don't
to...
waste my time with the OGGN. They're a group of waste. I don't want to even deal with that. New model agreement, I'm not even listening to them. They're a set of people who are not technically capable and gripers from history. OGGN doesn't exist in my frame of thoughts. Let's move on to the next question. We've dealt with that. We just have a new PSA now. Okay, we're not paying attention to OGGN. No, OGGN, nothing. They don't figure in my scheme of things. They're just like the Glen Lal. The same Janet Bulkan is part of this. She's become a specialist on everything to block development. She wants to block the funds going to the Amerindians. She wants to block climate funds. Now she wants to block oil and gas funds. These people make a business out of this sort of thing and sit abroad. More than half of them, 90% of them live abroad, wasting our time. But move on.
My next question is in relation to your reservations about releasing the expenses incurred in the Stabroek block. Don't you think that citizens have a right to know what their oil money is being used on?
They sent you, they didn't send the other one last week to ask me the silly questions. What's the other reporter? Like, it seems as though every week they pick you up. We dealt with that issue to move on.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, okay. every week is the same thing, and they send different reporters. Glenn, I'll give you all this talking point. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you.